The views expressed on the Final Straw Radio do not necessarily reflect those of Asheville FM, Friends of Community Radio, or any of the affiliate radio stations airing the show. Airing first on Asheville FM, WSFM-LP at 103.3 FM in Asheville, North Carolina. This is The Final Straw, and I'm William Goodenough. The show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions, comments, or suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net. Also, if you're interested in rebroadcasting any episode or segment of the show, you're free to do so. Just send us an email if you end up using any content. If you care to, you can send us letters at our new address, which is The Final Straw Radio, P.O. Box 6004, Asheville, North Carolina 28816. The show is brought to you by Firestorm Books and Coffee. Located at 610 Haywood Road, Firestorm Books and Coffee is a worker-owned cooperative in Asheville specializing in offbeat, underground, and independent literature. You can find a sample of Firestorm's catalog of books and zines, plus a full calendar of events at their website, firestorm.coop.
This week on The Final Straw, we'll be airing the second half of our interview with anarchist, author, and cartoonist nonagenarian Donald Rooum from Bradford, West Yorkshire, England. Donald has written introductions to anarchism and has been a leading organizer in movements in the UK against nuclear war, the death penalty, and the use of corporal punishment against children in schools. This summer, myself and William found our way to London and were delighted to sit down and chat with Donald in the East End to hear his stories. The first portion of this chat, which aired on July 29, 2018, can be found in full at our website. In the chat, Donald speaks about his beginnings in anarchism, his art studies, his time creating the Wildcat comics and other pieces for which he is best known, anarchists of his time during the 1940s through today, and his activism mentioned above. Now you'll hear all about Donald's, quote, 15 minutes of fame, unquote, in which he was nicked on his way to a demonstration against the visit to London by King Paul of Greece and Queen Frederica in 1963, and charged by Detective Sergeant Harold Tanky Challoner for carrying a brick to the demonstration. The problem for Donald is that the brick was placed in his pocket by Challoner while he was in police custody. The problem for Challoner is that Donald was smart enough to realize this, collect the proof of the framing attempt, and successfully defend himself in court against the charges. In what became known as the Challoner Affair, Donald's self-defense shook the public trust in policing in the UK and led to the detective sergeant's downfall for corruption. Donald also talks about the case that overshadowed the Challoner Affair, at the time known as the Profumo Affair. After that, Donald defends the work of Max Stirner on egoism, talks about Benjamin Tucker's problematic translation of The Unique in Its Own, Eddie Shaw and the Glasgow anarchists of the 1940s, multi-generationality in anarchism, human nature in anarchism, Rojava and Murray Bookchin. Of note, Donald confuses Murray Bookchin's social ecology idea with the deep ecology which Bookchin railed against. As with the prior portion of this interview, the podcast version is more full and complete than the radio version. So if you're hearing this over the airwaves and want to hear a little more of Donald, visit thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org and search ROOUM. There you can find our podcast going back to 2009, as well as easy ways to subscribe to our podcast so that you never have to miss an episode of The Final Straw, our occasional tech security podcast Error 451, or Bad News, Angry Voices from Around the World, an English-language podcast from the A-Radio network, of which we're a part. You can also find our contact information, info about following us on various anti-social medias, as well as how to donate. The Final Straw Radio is also a part of the Channel Zero network of English-language anarchist podcasts. Here's a jingle from another member of CZN.
Radical Underground is a podcast that connects underground music with radical politics from around the world. So if you like anarchy and good music about kicking fascists in the face, check us out on Channel Zero, SoundCloud, iTunes, and anywhere else you can find us.
Sick of your right-wing bullshit, it's a fucking disgrace. So let the vegan push right in, kicking you in the face. Kicking you in the face. Kicking you in the face.
But now here's a quick announcement. Philly Anarchist Black Cross is asking people to write letters in support of the Virgin Island 3. The Virgin Island 5, aka Fountain Valley 5, were a group of activists wrongly convicted of murdering 8 people in 1973 at the Rockefeller-owned golf course in St. Croix. They were all in their early 20s when they were rounded up with hundreds of others, and forced confessions were obtained. Because now only 3 are held in prison, they're now referred to as the Virgin Island 3. There's a campaign to commute the sentences of Abdul Aziz, aka Warren Ballantyne, Hanif Shabazz Bey, aka Beaumont Giraud, and Malik Bey, aka Merrill Smith, as they have been in prison for 46 years for a crime they deny committing, and they pose no threat to the community. You can find out more on this, including addresses to write, potential scripts to work off of, and numbers to call, and more about their campaign at phillyabc.wordpress.com/vi3-campaign.
Let me go get another book and
Sure.
I'll read another bit out to you. It is written by an ex-policeman, but he is very prejudiced. That he's talking about himself being. So this is what this bloke says. Challoner's removal from the West End, the gangsters, thugs, pimps and strong-armed men of Soho could scarcely believe their good fortune, although they had been prepared to make a capital outlay of £16,000 by today's standards to rid themselves of the pestilential Challoner, a skinny little anarchist who was unknown to them, had done it for them free of charge. And what happened, of course, was, I was going on a demonstration perfectly peacefully. I was arrested and charged with carrying an offensive weapon, namely a piece of brick to throw at the Queen. I put up an ordinary defence, which surprised Mr. Challoner, because he'd never come across anybody who would put up an ordinary defence. Ordinary defence was, I have evidence that I can't have done it. And but this was just self-protection, nothing to do with anarchism, nothing to do with trying to get rid of Challoner, except the idea of getting rid of Challoner and his gang didn't occur to me until I'd actually been arrested. I didn't think, I thought, you go on a demonstration, you got a load of people there, the police might get annoyed, and you might get a few complaints of assault against policemen or things, but you don't get policemen inventing cases against people who are perfectly innocent. It never occurred to me. It just didn't occur to me until it occurred. And it didn't occur to me until it occurred to me. That's right. That's right. We got and so I wasn't fighting for the National Council for Civil Liberties to get rid of the pestilential charity. I was trying to save my own skin. Yeah. That's all I was doing, and so I became famous. For 15 minutes.
I mean, it was a really clever approach that you took to, like, the way that you wrote it in the Wildcat introduction, to have just read this detective, like this novel about crime scene things.
Not a novel, a book about forensic science. Yes, just happened to have read it, and Challoner just happened to make a silly mistake as he was planting the evidence. He just happened to keep me in overnight, so that it couldn't be said that I had changed anything. He just happened to pick on somebody who had a very good job and was able to hire a barrister, and all kinds of things just happened. They all fell together by accident, and later on, as a teacher at art school, we had the chairman of the Society of Magistrates or something came round to talk to us and tried to talk about things, and he said, well, your case is very unusual. You bet it is. Policemen who invent cases are more careful usually. They don't lay themselves open to be exposed. And Mr. Challoner had been going for years. Most of the people who he did were crooks, but he was inventing evidence. That was why the National Council for Civil Liberties were after him. They didn't like policemen inventing evidence, especially against what started it off was that a woman who worked for the National Council for Civil Liberties was asked by the proprietor of the place where she went to lunch if she could do anything about their son who had been falsely charged with carrying an offensive weapon. It's nothing to do with the Brits case, nothing to do with my case. This was a successful case where this bloke, whose name was Arturo Padrini, whose parents could scarcely speak English, although they made quite good coffee, I understand. They were all worried and asking for the National Council for Civil Liberties to do something about their son. And quite a few people. There's a book about the Challoner case with the result of my case, which based on showing that Challoner was a liar. And that Challoner was a liar led to 36 people being released, including one who was doing 7 years, but most of them were under arrest, waiting prosecution. They were released from that, and others had been fined £10 or something, and had their thing withdrawn. But it just this bloke is going on about how Challoner had suffered. What about the people who were on the demonstration? 8 of us who had been doing nothing wrong, and if Challoner had had his way, we would have been stuck for life with a police profile for carrying offensive weapons. No, it's not a good idea to be called to court for a driving offence and say anything known. Yes, he was done for carrying an offensive weapon. Yeah, I have no respect for this author at all. He did.
He's just basically a police officer writing positively about this other police officer, trying to varnish his plaque, sort of. Yeah.
Well, Kirby's idea is that Challoner is to be commended because even though his methods were suspect, he was getting rid of a lot of protection rocketeers. I think the one where Padrini was arrested seems to have been, as far as I can make out, it was possible in Soho. Soho was, and probably still is, at the edge of legality. At the time there were strip clubs which were illegal, and there were gambling clubs which were illegal and things. And there were people who went round these illegal clubs demanding money not to bomb them and things. And Challoner was protecting the almost legal businesses against the business of these protection racketeers. Only the protection racketeers were working as individuals. So they didn't have to. No, I knew an anarchist who was running a bookshop in the middle of a bookstall in the middle of the night, and he told me that one of the protection racketeers had come round and said, "Ah, John, I've been watching how well you've been doing, and you are not doing very well, are you? So, shall we call it 10 shillings a week? Or 10 shillings a day, I forget." But he was demanding a modest sum in bribes not to kick his stall over. And so John agreed to pay this bribe. Later in the evening, the wife of a top gangster came round, a top racecourse gangster, one of the racketeers, and who he referred to as Mrs. Track Spot, and she came round and was going through the books, and he said, "I'm going to have to give up this business because Curly King's been round collecting for his ex-serviceman's fund." And Curly King never said, he came round and said, "I'm collecting for the ex-serviceman's fund. That'll be £5, please." And never openly said, "I will beat you up if you don't pay." But everybody knew that. So he told Mrs. Jack Spot about him the same evening that Curly King had been on to him. And before his shift was over, Curly King came and said, "Ah, John, I discovered that I shan't be needing your contribution after all." So
I guess it's about which bullies you have as friends.
What was going on in Soho? Yes, it was. Yeah, you can see why somebody might have thought it was a good idea. But Challoner could have got away with it for years because people knew about it and knew everybody. But then he decided that he was going to have to go after demonstrators he was a patriotic bloke, and demonstrators had booed the Queen, so he thought he would arrest some demonstrators and charge them with carrying offensive weapons. And that was his downfall, that he should have kept to the crooks, not bothered with the demonstrators. He could have got away with it for many years. I read in this book, what I didn't read anywhere else, that the police forces in Britain, I suppose, they've got a lot of uniformed people who would like to be detectives. So they allow uniformed persons who volunteer to go out with the detectives in plain clothes. They go out in their own time, apparently. They're in plain clothes, and they are called CID aides. And what happened in Soho was that instead of sending out the CID aides with the qualified detectives, they divided the group into CID and CID aides. They put one detective sergeant in charge of CID, the other one, Mr. Challoner, in charge of CID aides, and Challoner was then in a position that he got this load of young men who were police constables, and they wanted a certificate from him that they would make good detectives, so they would do what he wanted. And this was really what the trouble was. So after the Challoner case, this book says, they stopped doing that, and they put the CID aides in with the qualified detectives as their assistants, and stopped this business of sending the CID aides on separate things.
It sounds like there were a lot of big changes in the organisation of the department after.
Oh, I don't think there were big changes.
No.
I don't think they've changed much. No, because the magistrates' courts haven't changed, and you still see occasional cases. A man is found guilty of assault and is able to go back to the appeal court with a photograph that he's got from somewhere showing that he never assaulted anybody, and the judge says, well, we don't thank the police for bringing this case, because if they'd looked at the evidence properly, they would find they didn't have a case. And so they get a notice in the newspaper, and the police get their knuckles rapped and sent back on duty. And I think this is generally true with small courts, probably in America as well, that they haven't got time to mount big cases against people who are drunk and disorderly. So they put up with evidence that wouldn't count if it was in a murder case. So I think this is one of the troubles with authoritarian society. And like the anti-anarchists could say, if you went in anarchist society, everybody has to be good. If you've got a society where people are prepared to be nasty, then you'll have a nasty society.
What year was that?
Challoner.
The Challoner case.
The arrest and the trial were in 1963. The public inquiry then took place, and the official report on the public inquiry came out in 1965, and is generally dismissed as a whitewash. There is also apparently a definitive inquiry which reported in 1971, but the report will not be published until 2042.
Why is that?
To protect the people who would otherwise find themselves in court and whatnot. The 22. There was another case on the same year. I don't know whether you've heard of it. The case of a famous prostitute who was 18 years old at the time, and she managed to wreck the career of a cabinet minister. By accident, she didn't want to, but it was another accidental case, and that won't be published until 2044, two years after the Challoner case. And this is all to protect the people, to give them a chance to die before the story comes out.
So that's justice in the court system, is protect the people that are servants of the courts or servants of the system.
Yes, you don't want to start up cases that have already been solved, except, of course, that you've got a case where somebody's found guilty and the defence wants to put it up again. But the prosecution doesn't want to go back over cases and so waiting until people die. And I think it's probably been going on since the Vatican was founded. They keep reports, but they don't publish them for 100 years or so. The United States has probably got a lot of reports somewhere which are known and which have numbers and which you can find out exist, but they are not published and not to be published until years later.
There's someone who volunteers at the same radio station as us who used to work in the National Archives in Washington, D.C., and it sounded like a really fascinating job. But he worked for a while on the same area where the Kennedy assassination, where the archives were for that. And yeah, I think those files have started trickling out. Files about the Bay of Pigs have slowly started trickling out.
Yes, I think that's probably right. for historical purposes, the government has a long memory, so they want to keep on with the case after everybody's dead and publish the result, but only when it's safe to do so. So it's quite interesting, really, that goes on.
Yeah.
I think.
I wonder if it's that the courts are afraid that people with power that are engaged, that they would be calling out in their reports, would somehow undermine the stability of the court if they felt that they were in danger of being brought to public attention for being engaged in illegal activities, and so it's safer for the court's functioning to happen afterwards.
The bloke who found himself exposed, the name of the 18-year-old prostitute was Christine Keeler, if you come across that. And the man got up in Parliament and denied that he had anything to do with Christine Keeler. The people who were after him in Parliament managed to get it said that he had been associated with Christine Keeler and proved that he was. So he had to leave court, and he became an important chairman of a charity, and he died last year. Died with very good report. It just that in his case he'd been done down by keeping his association with Christine Keeler quiet. Probably kept his association with a lot of girls quiet. Some people have died recently, entertainers and politicians and whatnot, and have been shown to be rapists and child molesters and stuff like that. There's probably a load of those being kept behind bars just to keep quiet about them.
Do you mind if I ask like 2 more questions?
Oh, by all means,
okay.
Yes.
In your essay, Anarchism and Selfishness, which was published in The Raven in 1986, you referred to yourself as a Stirnerite anarchist.
Oh, yes. That's right, yes.
Always a contentious person, Stirner evokes many things to many people.
Yes.
How has his writing influenced your approach to ethics and to anarchism?
I've written about I've got some of his writing in here, and I've also written about the way that he's written and been published. And he's a philosopher, but he also thinks of himself as very funny. So he makes a lot of jokes, and I think some of them are funny, and I think some of them are difficult, and some people, Marx and
Engels, or
they published a book called the
German Ideology, right?
That's the one, German Ideology, and the middle part of it is about Stirner, and Stirner is very long-winded, but the commentary on Stirner is about 1.5 times as long as the book itself. And there's one point where Stirner goes on for about 2 pages saying how everything is inhabited by spirits. And you've got spirits for this and spirits of that, and he goes on. At the end of it, he says, "Have you ever seen a spirit?" Well, not personally, but my grandmother. And they said, yeah, we all believe in spirits because out of respect for our grandmothers. And so the German ideology goes through all the things that he said about things, and then just chops off and fails to mention that Stirner goes on about we all believe in spirit. So you're left with the idea that Stirner really thought all this rubbish, because Marx and Engels chopped off the punchline of his joke. Which, and another thing is, do you know German at all? Neither do I, except what I did at school. But ich habe meine Sache auch nicht gestellt, is a quotation from Goethe, and that's used at the beginning and end of Stirner's book. So he obviously regards it as important. It's translated in the standard English translation as, "I have set my affair on nothing." What does that mean? Ich habe meine Sache auf nicht gestellt means I have made my aim in life nothing, or I have made my cause nothing, or I have put my, to read the standard translation of Goethe, my trust in nothing I have placed.
Okay.
And so the English translation is really rubbish about what Stirner is quoting, and there's a load of other rubbish in it as well. Benjamin Tucker employed a bloke who was supposed to know German about it, and also had 3 or 4 native German speakers and a professional philosopher going through it as well. But they missed that point. And at the beginning, the book is called the Unique One and His Property, on his or its property, because in German, if the proprietor, it's what is proprieted that you use the thing for. In English, you use the proprietor's sex, gender as a pronoun. So it is rather awkward, but the Benjamin Tucker stops Stirner's thing altogether and substitutes the ego and his own. And it's ridiculous. Stirner doesn't mention the ego at all. He mentions egoism, meaning selfishness, but he doesn't speak of the ego except when he's quoting another philosopher. And so it really, the title of the book is a misrepresentation of what he's got to say. And people have asked me, what does Stirner say the ego is? And you have to say, Stirner doesn't say anything about the ego. This is a title which he's stuck with long after he's got rid of the book. So that's my idea of Stirner's book. That's and having said that, yes, Stirner is long-winded, and he makes jokes, and you can't tell when you're doing whether he's making a joke or whether he's philosophizing, and he's so he's difficult. But I think that the people who put down Stirner as, there's an edition of Stirner called Roots of the Right, and it puts him as a right-wing philosopher. I think in the first part of the book he writes about how you shouldn't have any cause except yourself. You shouldn't go for patriotism or love or make anything more important than you are. And he goes on about that, which fits in with right-wing. But when you read the second part of the book, you discover that he has quietly been all this time a libertarian socialist, who is all for the trade union movement, of course. He likes the trade union movement because this is people banding together, not for the sake of banding together, which he's against, but each one for his own purposes, and each one adds the strength of the others to his own strength, and that is how solidarity in a trade union movement works. And Stirner actually says that, but the people who represent him as right wing I've only read the beginning of the book. I heard of Stirner, first place, from a Glasgow anarchist. I was actually invited up to Glasgow to speak at the anarchist platform there. And there I was taught about Stirner by a sheet metal worker called Eddie Shaw, who was a magnificent orator. He came to London, and there was a poet listened to him in Trafalgar Square speaking on anarchism, and the poet said when he heard Eddie Shaw speaking, he could only think of Shakespeare. Other thing. It's not the same thing. It's like saying you listen to Louis Armstrong playing the trumpet, and you can only think of Mozart. Mm-hmm. Well, up to a point, but Louis Armstrong has only one instrument and only one performer, mm-hmm. and it was the same with comparing Eddie Shaw with Shakespeare. But Eddie Shaw was a performer on his own, writing his own material, or thinking out his own material. He never wrote anything down, the bugger. Remember what he says, and he really is magnificent. Say, does your son go to school? Aye. Does he go to Sunday school? Oh, aye. Just a subtle changing of language like that. He's got a thing and got Eddie Shaw refused to be called up. He resisted conscription. He wouldn't go. So they took him in a car to the conscription centre, took him in a police car, got him out the police car, asked him if he would now take a medical examination for the thing, and he said no. Back in the police car, back to jail. But he looked at the clock as he was going, and when he was called up, he was told that he had been taken to the recruitment centre, and the police evidence was that they had taken him there at 2:30, and he asked the policeman in evidence, say, and what time was I taken to the police? And a load of questions that didn't mean much. One of them, what time? Policeman looked at his notebook and said, you were taken from the recruitment centre back to the police car at 24 minutes past 2. That's my defence. I couldn't have answered the question whether I would take the thing at 2:30, because at 2:30 I was in the police car being driven somewhere else, and the local magistrate, whatever it's called in Scottish law, said, the sheriff said, this was a ridiculous thing, because he had said that had it been 2:30 and it been asked, he would have replied. And then he shouted out in car, it's not that at all. and the High Court judge said, no, it isn't that at all, is it, Mr. Shaw? You're quite right. The question whether you could have answered this question differently at 2:30 doesn't arise, because you couldn't have answered the question at 2:30. Any case dismissed, anything else you'd like to say? And Eddie, being Eddie, said, well, sir, it's the laws this government's a big firm, and I'm a very poor man. I wonder whether you could do something about my expenses. And the judge said, oh, all right. What about £10 costs? I'll do. I'm now giving you Eddie's version of the story, which
That's amazing.
Where he one of Eddie's stories has a boy being called before the headmaster. And the headmaster talks like this, and the boy talks like that on the thing. So, very funny performance, even if it was said by a comedian telling jokes. Eddie Shaw. When I went up to speak there, it was during the winter, and they had a hall on Sunday evening full of men. Mm-hmm. There was only one woman in the whole hall. They were about 300 men. It wasn't a big hall. About 300 men. There's one woman, and she was the chairman. And this was all men who went out to hear Eddie Shaw. In the summer, they got crowds of thousands. Yeah. They would work at a street corner and they would keep having to pull up their platform and move it further and further in the street to accommodate the crowd. It helped, of course, that in those days the pubs were not open on Sunday evenings in Glasgow. So the men had, while their dinner was being prepared, they had to get out of the house. Where to go? Well, they didn't want to go to church, so they went to hear the anarchists speaking. There were three regular anarchist speakers, of which especially Eddie was the one they all referred to.
Did he eventually? You said he didn't write anything down, meaning that he was not scripted.
He didn't write anything. Eventually, he migrated to Canada. He didn't become a speaker in Canada. We never heard from him again. One of his of the other speakers in Glasgow, Jimmy Rayside, migrated to Australia, and he did come back. Frank Leach, an Englishman, though you wouldn't know it, he worked in Glasgow somewhere. I thought he had a Glasgow accent, but apparently he was an Englishman, and he died, and I knew about it. But Eddie just disappeared off the face of the earth when he migrated to Canada. Mm. So one of these days we shall hear from him from his sons, perhaps. That's when he was being arrested as a conscientious objector. So, this is your daddy being taken off to prison for refusing to kill a man. And the police said, you didn't have to say that.
Oh, the poor police. They're going to feel bad for themselves. So many...
You'll be able to get 3 or 4 interviews out of this book.
Yeah. Many people state that anarchism is a youthful endeavor. Do you agree with this? That anarchism is a thing for... Like, when I've told people, I'm an anarchist, and have been 30 years old or 35 years old, people say, you didn't grow out of that.
Yes, I have met people who grew out of it. Yes, when I was a student, I spent a lot of my weekends at a youth hostel, in Lancashire, where the warden was an anarchist, and so it was a good place for anarchist meetings because it was a youth hostel and you could collect people from all over the place. And she was very important to my development. Later on, I saw her, and she said she should have given it up for the thing which she had gone to, which was the campaign to get clean water to everybody. Yeah, all right. That's another good cause. And she thought she'd grown out of anarchism, important though she had been to the idea.
It seems as I get older, I feel like I lose more and more people that I was close to who are around me, who were important to me, who identified as anarchists. And I wonder if, in your opinion, does it say something about anarchism that most people don't have a very long longevity, have strong longevity with the philosophy? Is it something in the approach that we have of anarchism that...
I think it is the difficulty with anarchism in comparison with other possible things is that if you start off as a childhood Labour supporter, for instance, you can carry on and eventually you can earn your living as a Labour politician or something, or a Conservative politician, or a Communist politician or something. There are incomes to be got from having ideas. And if you're very clever, you can manage an income by having clever anarchist ideas, as in the case of Colin Ward. But you're not limited to that, then you have to take your anarchism with other things in order to make a living at it. So I never got a penny for Wildcat until what's his name gave me a commission. That was very nice, but that's the first money I've had from Wildcat for going on drawing Wildcat every issue, about every fortnight or every month, varied, for more than 30 years, and never earned any money from it because there isn't money to be earned from anarchism. Or anarchist propaganda, but there is reputation to be earned, so I didn't lose, and so I think that's part of it as well. Being anarchist was never the only ambition I had, and so I didn't let the other ambitions take over because anarchism was supplying something, and still is. So that's possibly the explanation of why I don't grow out of it.
Yeah.
Why don't you grow out of it?
I've been trying for a long time, and it just... I've been trying for a very long time, and it just won't let go of me.
Yes. Well, this is the thing, of course, that you spend your time in anarchist propaganda, and if you don't spend your time in anarchist propaganda, eventually you retire, but you are still able to talk anarchism with your granddaughter. So, or in my case, my great granddaughter. I've got a great granddaughter now. She is 8 months old. So.
That's beautiful. That's great. Yeah,
yes. Well, everybody who's 8 months old is lovely.
Especially if they don't live with you.
Is there what?
Especially if they don't live with you.
If they don't. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yes. Her mother is a scientist, works for the Crick Institute, and the Crick Institute is trying to find a cancer cure and whatnot, and her mother goes out. So her father, who is a professional poet, would you believe it?
Yeah.
Her father, my grandson, who is a professional poet, has been a house husband looking after his daughter for about 3 months now. I mean, her mother goes home every evening. She does in contact with her mother, but her father has been the person who looks after her. And how does one become a professional poet? I don't know. He gets he's had 3 or 4 books published, and he's got a poetry, and it's a modern poetry, and it strikes me as very like prose divided into sections, into lines of intermediate length.
Yeah.
And don't say, why is it poetry? I can't understand it at all. He's very sympathetic to my failure to understand it. But it is nice, and so, yeah, so he gets little commissions to be the poet in residence at this place and that place and stuff like that. But he also gets paid by publishers for writing this stuff.
That's great. It's a dream.
Yeah, yes, it's a marvelous achievement, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was struck by something you said earlier in the interview, and this was quite a while ago. You said something about, to have an anarchist society, everyone needs to be good. And I was wondering if you think that is also maybe a failure in how we think about anarchism, because that seems to me to, and I agree with that assessment. I'm wondering if you have any further thoughts on that.
Well, I answered that question. In answer, the question I was answering when I talked about it was, had I changed over time? Had I got the same idea about society and people as I had when I was a 16-year-old schoolboy and first became an anarchist? And I have changed, and I thought for a time that I couldn't possibly be an anarchist, because I couldn't get out of my head that some people are absolutely awful. And I don't know how I've done it, but somehow I have reconciled it, and I think that I can be an anarchist and even admit that some people are absolutely awful, and I can't see how they can be cured. But remember that when I was younger than I had been a communist, and all socialists. It's a basic socialist belief that it's possible to have a society where with a gift economy, where people give what they can and are given what they need. And this is the whole of the reason the communists differ from the anarchists, is that the communists want to get there by means of imposing it, and the anarchists want to get there by other means. And in the case of Bakunin, think no particular means. Yes, just get rid of the government and everything will sort itself out. So there's an enormous difficulty there, but it's a difficulty for the communists as well, because Marx was just as much as Bakunin thought that you could have a society without any kind of government. What they differed in was how to get there. So you say, well, that's a non-answer, but I am saying that the anarchists are not the only people who think like that. The whole socialist idea is that you can have a society of people who are or that you have got a society of people who are generally good, and that the minority of people who aren't generally good will be dealt with one way or another, like can be converted to the thing or whatnot.
Yeah.
And that the reason they are the reason they are not generally good is because they were brought up wrong. This is a general idea of socialists, and I think I agree with it, but I can't be an anarchist if I agree with it. So I'm an anarchist, so I don't agree with it.
It's good logic.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm an anarchist, but I am not unaware of the difficulties.
Yeah, it reminded me, that statement reminded me of a conversation that I had with a friend very recently who is having a pretty deep-ish crisis of politics because he's realizing that generally people are not good, or like generally people, what he says is aren't worth organizing with, or who whatever, and that's throwing his anarchism into a lot of self-doubt.
This is Colin Ward's book Anarchy in Action.
Yeah.
And there he is shown in example after example after example that people generally behave in an anarchist way, and that a society, however authoritarian, couldn't exist unless people behaved in an anarchist way. That the most authoritarian societies are in fact organised by anarchists. The authoritarian societies only organised to boss society about. There's something in that. It's just that we have to get round or deny or dodge the difficulties which are undoubtedly there. However, we don't need to worry. We don't need to worry because the free society is not going to happen next week. We have to take the long view of when the free society will be there.
Have you, I don't know how much you keep up with current events, if you read a lot of newspapers or research in magazines. Have you heard about the organizing going on in the Kurdish regions in Syria, in Rojava? There's people formerly affiliated with the PKK or affiliated with the PKK from Turkey, right? These like Kurdish Marxists.
Yeah, I know the PKK. Yes.
So
the PKK would come to occasionally to freedom, offering to write an article. To which I would say, well, yes, we'd like an article, but it should have an anarchist slant in it. Just don't talk in favour of the PKK, except to to say that they are being suppressed or something. Yes, this was acceptable to the PKK members, who are anxious to get their story in anyway. So.
Well, I was going to say in northern Syria, it's not perfect, it's not totally anarchist, but a lot of anarchists from the UK and from Europe and from the US have gone over to fight against ISIS with the feminist and decentralized anti-capitalist movement that's happening in northern Syria.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you'd had much of an opportunity to read or hear about things there.
I know nothing about the activities of anarchists in those places. Nothing at all. Nobody's ever said anything. So I'm interested to hear that there are anarchists going over to take part in that struggle.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And the American anarchist, at one time anarchist Murray Bookchin, who stopped identifying as an anarchist, but was pushing after social ecology. He was pushing democratic confederalism was the model name that he was pushing, which is still meant to be decentralized, ecologically centered, feminist, anti-capitalist, and based on kind of like council communism, I think, like decentralized and down like local neighborhood councils. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Abdullah Öcalan and others in the PKK started looking to him, as well as Zapatistas, as well as like other models that were decentralized. And so a lot of anarchists nowadays are saying it's like Spain '36 sort of.
Well, Freedom Press has just reissued one of Murray Bookchin's books.
Oh, cool.
What does he call it? Ecology. Yeah, it's now called Green. They're now the movement now called Green. Murray Bookchin calls it ecology, and he has a thing called deep ecology. Don't quite understand what deep ecology means, and when he tries to explain what deep ecology means, he explains what he. It's not an explanation. Yeah. Deep ecology is humanist, but it is not the modern humanist, which means nothing. This is about the humanism of the high Renaissance. And he actually says that deep ecology is about the anybody who knows the history of literature knows that the humanists of the high Renaissance were students of Greek and Latin writing, and they're nothing to do with a deep ecology or anything like that. Humanism now means something like atheism, but in the high Renaissance it meant nothing like atheism. It meant going back to the old literature, and so he. I'm afraid I thought and think that Murray Bookchin uses words to create a sensation and not to make a point. So there.
I wish we could publish a retort from Murray Bookchin, but I think he died in 2004.
I think he did.
He died in 2004, but I was going to say I wish that I could go seek a retort from him, a response.
Well, no, as I say, his thing on something or other ecology is just been reissued by Freedom Press, the same as it was before. No, he wrote in The Raven, I think in the first thing of The Raven, he wrote about deep ecology, and I wrote a thing for the Raven number 4 called The Catachresis of Ecology, about how people were using the word ecology to mean a campaign. And ecology, as everybody accepts these days, that ecology is a branch of biology. But Murray Bookchin was among the people who set about using ecology as a campaign against the environmental degradation. Well, I said we approve of any campaigns against environment, but we don't approve of it being called ecology, especially not when I was a student of ecology at the Open University and was buying a book on ecology that had bugger all about ecology. It was just about the campaign.
Well, do you have any more?
I don't have any more questions. Do you have any?
No. Really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Well, thank you very much for coming and listening to me. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed being listened to.
If you appreciate the work we do here at TFSR, please consider a donation for our efforts. We work to bring you anarchist and adjacent voices from around the world every week, and a few rubles in our pocket would help us to pay for the services that we use and the promotion to get these voices into other folks' ears. You can make a one-time donation on PayPal or Cash Music, or you can make recurring donations via LiberaPay, Patreon, and soon on Drip, where you can get swag from us, including mixtapes, t-shirts, buttons, or as they call them in the UK, badges, stickers, and zines. Check out the links on our site or in the show notes for more info, and thanks for listening.